Miss Ann and Mr. Gerald have lived in Thomasville most of their lives. Miss Ann was born in 1944 and Mr. Gerald was born in 1940. They have 3 kids, Anne-Marie, Fela, and Paul. In this narrative, they explain a couple of town characters and how Dozier Hardware came to be. I asked them, do you remember any town characters? Miss Ann said, we had a man named Mally Jackson, and he stood at the railroad track and directed traffic every time the train came. He let you go across, or if you didn't think you could go, you wouldn't cross. Mr. Gerald said if you didn't do what he said, he would let you know. But everybody knew him and everybody liked him. Miss Ann said there was a black man named called Switching Sand. He was dark black and he wore white clothes and switched all over town. He was just a real friendly. Mr. Gerald said there was another one, Willie Jones. He was another black man that worked around. He was a little handicapped, but, Willie worked for Mr. Bird Goodman, who owned the Del Mar restaurant. The building still stands. It was one of the finest restaurants in the state, but anyway, Mr. Good Willie worked for Mr. Goodman, and he was sort of in a tight situation one morning, and Mr. Goodman sort of talked ugly to him because he wasn't doing whatever. But later in the day, Mr. Goodman went to Willie and apologized. He said, Willie, I shouldn't have talked to you like that. That wasn't your fault. And Willie said, oh, think nothing of it, Mr. Goodman. I just consider the source. Miss Ann said, oh, the other one was named Bojazz. Tell him about Bojazz, Jill. Well, he could drive, but his head moved around. And Coach Anderson, who is Charlie Anderson's father, I'm sure you've heard of him, he coached all of us. But he was at the cemetery Choctaw corner. At that time, the road was not paved, it was just sandy. And Bojazz walked to work on that area of the cemetery. And he was a little anxious about going by the cemetery anyway, especially at night. And so Coach Anderson picked out a time and got him a sheet. It wasn't much traffic every now and then, but the coach was laying down with a sheet over him, and Bojazz came walking by. Coach Anderson stood up with a sheet over him so it looked like a ghost, and Bojazz went, and couldn't get it in gear, and just like that, he fainted.
Now I'm going to tell you about how Dozier Hardware came to be. This is what Miss Ann said. I can remember my father's father. My grandmother died before I was born and lived only until my dad's first birthday. But my grandfather came to Thomasville in 1903. He lived in East Alabama and moved here and opened a hardware store. It is where People's Corner is today. That was Andrew's Hardware. Then across to the street where Edward Jones is now, that was where Dozier Hardware was. My grandfather was an Andrews, and he had cousins that were also in the hardware business. One store was in Jackson, one was in Alabama, and one was in Citronelle, and the other was in Chatham, Alabama. Back in those days, everything came by train or by rail, and with that many hardware stores, things that my granddaddy ordered might not get to him. They might take it to Jackson, Chatham, or Citronelle. A little interesting story. My grandfather became interested in Mr. Dozier's daughter across the street. Long story short, they got married. He was a Hampton Andrews and she was Claire Dozier. I told you everything came by train. When they got married, the two stores merged and because of that, it became confusing. They kept Dozier Hardware's name. So while all the Andrews down the line used to get their stuff, he no longer had that problem. Dozier Hardware got the correct orders. In 1903, they combined businesses and kept it down a lot of confusions. The store was always downtown Jackson.